once again. Cathar Love 111, Beyond Good and Evil. The Cathars, if nothing else, were a mysterious lot. Just so much has been lost. Historically, we know of their existence, courtesy of the Inquisition, and also a couple of people, one was a monk, who followed the Crusades and wrote down La Chanson de Crusade, the Song of the Crusades, and documented from the beginning all the various things, the burnings, the atrocities, all these things, and all these atrocities were put forward for the greater glory of God. We still seem to be hearing that refrain today, for God's good. Be as it may. But as had mentioned before, one of the common denominators when they burnt the Cathars, singly or in mass as a group, I think the largest group was at Lavore. There was 400 Cathar priests, women and men, clerics, who were burnt. 220 months ago, and it goes on and on. But over and over again it was mentioned, the fact was mentioned, that there were no screams. I'm not going to take that to its illogical conclusion and say that no one at all screamed. I think I'd be hard put not to. But it's just said that these people scream. So for them not to scream, they've obviously got to that stage in their quest for spiritual, for their spiritual quest, mystical quest, to the point that they can enter the flames and certainly control themselves to the point that they didn't scream. And that doesn't mean to say they didn't feel pain. This is leading me on to the fact that with the Cathar spiritual and mystical side, which was the whole point of their existence, which revolved around love, what they questioned philosophically and scientifically time, our consciousness, our body, the bodily functions, who we are, what are we, and where the hell are we going? I shouldn't say hell, where are we going? Because to the Cathars, that's one thing they did do. They liberated the Christians that they were involved with, the Catholics. They liberated them from the fears of hell, because hell was a very, very potent force to the Christians of those days, medieval Christians. So the Cathars had no time for heaven or hell, but there was a world of spirit. They were very much into that mystical side. So they came to a number of conclusions. And one was that in the world of spirit, there is no time. From the point of creation, it's the journey, because there's no destination. The journey is the destination. It just goes on and on. Our consciousness, once created, never dies. Also, because of our consciousness, We are a universe unto ourselves. The more science goes into it, and goes into molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, they realise that in each of ourselves there's virtually a universe. But with all this, it was taking them to a point, and possibly some Buddhists also heading in that direction, other Eastern, it's not an original thought, and even some of the early Christian Gnostics, they wanted to get a point that they were beyond or above good and evil. Because of our humanity, us being human, no matter what happens, we tend to say, oh, that's good, or that's bad, or that's terrible. We tend to give it, we put our judgment to it. So they wanted to be at a point where it was beyond judgment, beyond good and evil. Because the moment an action happens, we tend to make a judgment. Oh, that was great, that was cool, that was terrible, or whatever. It was evil. So they wanted to be to be above that, and to be above that means being non-judgmental and accepting things as they are. And that doesn't mean to say we aren't out to try and improve matters, make the world a better place, make ourselves a better person. So this is so much what they were into, and so they were really a metaphysical lot, a paranormal lot, because they meditated and they wanted to live lives of, so not a word we hear bandied around that much these days, holy or holiness, but they were into holiness. They were into goodness, but even being above goodness, where one is non-judgmental and one is accepting, and accepting it through knowledge. They knew that our consciousness, for the want of a better word, or the divine spark, or our soul, once created, never dies. Our consciousness goes on and on and on. And of course, being human in our cosmos, in our world, we have time as a linear progression. We're born, we live, we get old, we die, and of course to the Cathars and Gnostics and many others in the world, we reincarnate and we keep moving. We keep moving along. Many of them wish to get off this wheel of reincarnation, and they put all the eggs in one basket to a degree, and they wanted to become as spiritual as you could humanly possibly be, and this was their quest. There were others within the Cathar movement that said they wish to be reborn until the entire world is a loving world. So for those who opted for that, they had quite a number of lifetimes ahead of them. and the other thing is about our consciousness, because the events in the world that seem to be beyond our control, and so much of them are beyond our control. It has the effect of making us feel less of ourselves. But I put this to you. Because of our consciousness, everything that happens has happened and will happen, the past, now and in the future, literally, we are the epicenter, we are the center of all that exists because of our consciousness. That applies to me and that applies to you. And this is also about Catharism. Catharism is about one person, and this is why you can't really make Catharism into, in the modern day context, because the medieval Cathars were evolving from the religious and the religions of the day, but it's evolved into a universal philosophy of love, but also of a mystical sense. It accepts reincarnation, it accepts the occult. And because of our consciousness, no matter what happened, as has happened, it all moves around us, this central point of, in my case, me, in your case, you. So we are the center of everything that exists and will exist. That's a pretty amazing place to be from my point of view. So these were things that the Cathars explored. So where are we today? We're at a situation where every year there's at least one book coming out about the Cathars. Invariably they give a history of the Cathars, which has been gleaned from studies, and certainly studies of the Inquisition and what remaining literature there is. But how else are we to find out and understand about the beliefs and the philosophies and the aspirations and the quests for Cathars, which was always and will always, because it is questioning, it's Gnostic. To be a Gnostic, one has to think for oneself. We have a responsibility for our own mind, our own body and soul. We don't leave it to any priest, minister, mullah, imam, sheikh, pope or whatever. We don't need any intermediary between us and the divine. We take responsibility for our physical and our spiritual and our mystical lives. Well, not a lot seemed to have happened, but then various things did happen. There's Carl Jung, and he came out later as a Gnostic. He didn't admit to that until he was, I think, in his 50s, because of professional concerns. But he spoke about his guru and how he spoke about the metaphysical and how it impacts upon our lives. We had Dr. Arthur Gurdon in England, in Bristol, and he put his books out, The Cathars and Reincarnation, We Are One Another, A Foot in Both Worlds, which I'm going over again for probably the fourth or fifth time. But what I'm doing this time is picking out, quite apart from his story, things that are Cathar philosophy and the source of where they came from. And his two main sources was Mrs. Smith and Miss Mills, who both had this far memory and memories of their medieval times as Cathars. And they came out with expressions of the time with the Cathars, and so much of it is around love, goodness and evil, all these aspects. Since then, we have had Colin Bloy, who was channeled this information when he was at Montsegur. He was dowsing in the field, and all this information came to him. Oh, by the way, they're not easy to get, but the Cathars and Reincarnation We are one another, a foot in both worlds. These were Dr. Arthur Gurdon's books. They're certainly well worth reading because it tells his story and how he, as a scientist, and how he was, one way or another, he was dragged into this medieval Catharism. And then Colin Bloy, I've mentioned him before, but he came out with the quintessentials, if you like, of Catharism, and another reason why it's a philosophy. It can't be turned into a religion. I quote, well, I just won't go through the whole lot, but I'll quote because there's about 25 different what we call paragraphs. But essentially, Catharism, it has no fabric, only understanding. It has no membership. Important. It has no membership, save those who know they belong. You know, I know, if you do know. That's the membership. And this is why you can't say with Catharism it has 20 followers or 1,000,000 followers or whatever, because there's no membership. And there's reasons for this. The Catharism of before was organised, it had its members and so forth, and it was destroyed. When you have no membership, it's very hard to destroy, or no known membership. You can have many, many members, but no known membership. It then becomes very, very difficult to eradicate and destroy. It has no rivals, because it is non-competitive. It is not out against or for other religions or beliefs. That's up to those individuals. We are only concerned with our own. It has no ambition because it seeks only to serve. So therefore, someone can't get amongst the Catharism and somehow organise a power base and he's the head. And I'm not saying people don't do that and won't do that and aren't doing it. But you know and I know that's not really what Catharism is about. Catharism is the opposite to power. It knows of no boundaries, for nationalisms are unloving. Well, we know that. It is not of itself, because it seeks to enrich all groups and all religions. It acknowledges all great teachers of all ages who have shown the truth of love. Pardonnez-moi, pardon me. The point is, this information was channeled to Colin Bloy within 10-15 minutes. He just literally wrote it down, word after word. This happens to me on some occasions. I have to get up at night and literally, because the stuff is spinning around in my head, and I have to write, and just one sentence comes after another, and I know it's not mine, and one day that will come out. After that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there may be people within the world who have had, through their guides or past lives regression or something, information about Catharism, but to date it's certainly not on the world scene, or not easy to make oneself aware of it, because I'm certainly unaware of it, and I'm always looking for this as much as I can. Then it comes back to myself, or not to myself, but to Jim Callahan, who's Guillaume de Mirepoix, but it came to me because I spoke to him about guides, and he then got involved with his guide, Henri de Nemours, and he saw him 3 times. He was a huge man, like a French front row forward, and over a 7-year period they had these dialogues, some that concern me, but it's really dialogues at an intellectual level, and it really gives you a deep insight into how and the ways and the depth of the thinking of a Cathar perfecti, omnidinabors. So that's the Cathar dialogues. And I can't say it's an easy book because not everyone's really interested in sometimes intellectual sides or philosophical sides and what have you, but it's really quite down to earth, and Henri de Devos is a very practical person. Years ago, I'm talking 15 years ago, when my guide, Brad de Montsever, used to honour me with a few chats about different things, and much of it I wrote down. Unfortunately, that was years ago, and now the methods of data retention have changed, and so I've lost quite a lot of that. But used to say, I just don't understand why people simply can't love each other. But she did say to me, about the Tao Te Ching, which I had read, and I've got 3 of them to date. The Tao Te Ching, oh, there we go. The Tao Te Ching, and that's by Lao Tzu, and they've been translated into English. But you'll find that each Tao Te Ching that you pick up, the essence is the same, but people have their own idea about translations. I would say this one is the closest, because you have the Chinese on one side and his interpretation and translation on the other. Why I'm bringing this Eastern philosophic book out is that Brad has said to me that if you changed in the Tao Te Ching where it has the word Tao, and you put the Cathar word for the divine, the source, and you replace that, it would practically be a book on Catharism. And it's easy to see why when you read it, because just like I read this Colin Bloy, it has no fabric under understanding. What he has written there is basically also in the Tao Te Ching. They complement each other. What is said by the Cathars with Arthur Gurdon, the philosophical statements they make there, all fit within this, all complement each other, harmonise. They are not in argument with each other. So, what I have done, I have actually taken the Tao Te Ching and I have replaced the Tao. Now, the Tao is Lao Tzu and Socrates at the same time, both East and West, about 500 years before BC, before Christ. And they both had their gods, their societies. But Socrates and Plato came up, there has to be a source and origin of all things, and they call it the source. Lao Tzu came up with the same thing, there had to be a beginning, and it has no name, it's nameless, we don't understand it, so I call it the Tao. In both cases they said they're beyond our human understanding. And so what this is bringing us around to is that it's unlikely we are ever going to find any more historical information about the Cathars. When I say no more, certainly no major discoveries about the Cathars and their history. So all we are ever going to get now is like Dr. Arthur Gurdon, Colin Bloy, the Tao Te Ching, the Cathar dialogues. We're going to find more understanding about Cathars, the Cathar philosophy, the spiritual and mystical side of the Cathars, from occult, paranormal, or metaphysical, whatever word you want to put on it, sources. It's going to come from, it's going to be channeled, or whatever. Now, the thing is, how do we know, how do we test it for its veracity, for its authenticity? Well, as I do with these, they all complement each other, they all harmonise with each other, they each add to the understanding of each other and what we already know, and none of them are in argument with what we already know. So if I find a book or a lecture or whatever it is, and that person comes out and that person contradicts what we already know through history, through the occult sources that we've already got, then it's thumbs down. I'm not interested. If it is something which ties in with what we already have, it's in harmony with the loving philosophy, the philosophy for nature, the philosophy against power, the philosophy of Gnostic philosophy of you thinking and taking charge of your own mind, body and spirituality. If it all harmonises and it comes in with that, yes, I suggest you sit up and take notice. But while it comes out and it's something that's in diametrically opposite, or it says something, or it's well, the other thing is that people try to turn what we already have and turn it into some form of religion. So from a metaphysical and a spiritual, all this was part of Catharism, and in doing so, what they were trying to do is get us apart from the world, the judgmental world of that's good and that's bad and that's not, and that what you do that's not good and that's not good, to get away from judgmental side of things and raise ourselves above religion in many ways, but raise ourselves above good and evil. And one of the ways that we can also do that is to recognize that as human beings, or myself, yourself, that our very nature through our life experience and our lives is that whatever we do, we are not going to intentionally harm another person. But situations may come up, who knows what it might be, where we act, and we act within that moment, in that instant, and we do things. It might be it could be anywhere, anytime. The point is, whatever we do, we are not going to do something. We do it because it's something that needs to be done, and it's not because it's good, and it's not because it's evil. It's simply because it is it is of ourselves, and we don't have to be judgmental about it, and we've done it, and we don't have to say, oh, that was a wonderful thing and that was a bad thing, or whatever. Let's get above that. It's no easy thing to even explain, let alone rise above this good and evil. Enough. Bye for now. Talk again.